Welcome to Loving God and Loving Life. We're in 1 Thessalonians Chapter 4, where the theme is holiness and love for one another, and also Christ's return. Here in this chapter, we face just something that, well, it's kind of illogical to our brains, because this Thessalonian church, again, Paul had only been able to spend a very short time there, and he knew some of their struggles. And logic tells us that if somebody's struggling at all, well, let's keep it easy. Don't put too much on them. Let's make it light. Let's make it easy. Let's kind of just keep setting candy out in front of them to keep them moving forward. And we can get to some of the more corrective stuff. Well, let's wait until they've grown up a bit. Paul doesn't follow that logic at all. He's very clear in this book that, and this young church was struggling. They were struggling with a lot of temptation. In fact, he says in the 5th verse, Paul says, "I was afraid that in some way the tempter might have tempted you and that our labors might have been in vain." Paul says, man, I feared that you guys were so weak that when I left, I feared that the enemy would come in and tempt you guys and you'd all go right back to your old life and forget Christ entirely. He said, I had that thought. Well, to somebody in that spot, what does Paul say to them? And he nails them with the truth. When I say nails, I just mean he's bold with it. In verse 3, Paul says, God's will is for you to be holy, to stay away from all sexual sin. He goes on and gives more details, but he tells these people, and this is what I've discovered in 30 years of ministry, you got to tell the truth. It is God's will that we be holy. And if somebody's weak and struggling, it's because they're backing away from that standard. And it's just the truth, friends. God calls us to holiness, and strength comes when we answer that call. Until we answer that call, we're going to struggle. We're going to seem weak. True. But the answer is answering that call. Paul boldly lifts it up. He goes on in verse 8 and says, therefore, anyone who refuses to live by these rules is not disobeying man's teaching, but is rejecting God. Wow. Man, that sounds harsh. I can't count how many times over these years of ministry that I've just been that direct with somebody. You know what? You're just kind of rejecting God here. If you're going to choose that lifestyle, you're rejecting God here. And if somebody has real faith, if they've answered Jesus Christ, when they hear that truth, when the Spirit of God is touching their heart and he's putting his finger on something that's legitimately wrong, when they answer that call, that's when strength comes into them. And they stand up instead of falling back, and they end up living a strong life. Let's be bold with the truth that God has called us all to live holy lives. Let's challenge ourselves and each other with that. God, today, send us one person today to share your love with. And let's never forget, my friends, that loving God is the only way to live a life that we love.